Hello. All right. Welcome back. All right. So we're going to continue the lesson that we started last week about sines and cosines. So we've already talked about what is a sine and what is a cosine. Remember, sine is if we have a right triangle, the sine is going to be the opposite side divided by the hypotenuse. So opposite over hypotenuse. So if we're taking the sine of this angle right here, the opposite's over here. So it's going to be this side divided by this side. And that gives us the sine. If it's a cosine, all right, we're going to take the adjacent side, which is this one down here, and we're going to divide that by the hypotenuse. So it's the adjacent over the hypotenuse. That gives us the cosine. And we also talked about a way to remember that. Remember, so, ka, toa. All right, please remember sokatoa, 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 sokatoa. All right, sine, opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine, adjacent over hypotenuse. Tangent, opposite over adjacent. All right, so sokatoa. All right, remember this. All right, and last week we also talked a little bit about this. We said that if we have the sine of an angle, it is always going to equal the cosine of 90 minus that. All right, so 90 minus 9 is 81. All right, so the sine of 9 degrees equals the cosine of 81 degrees. The sine of 30 equals the cosine of 60. All right, and the sine of 77 equals the cosine of 13, because 90 minus 77 is 13. All right, so that works. All right, so today we're going to just have I think today will be a pretty short lesson, probably 15 minutes or so. So we are going to work on using the sine and cosine a little bit more. We're going to do a few problems with them, and then we're also going to solve a couple of word problems. Maybe 15 minutes or 20. We'll see. Hopefully it goes quickly. So 7, 8, and 9 are easy. All right. You had to do problems like this in your homework. It's the same as the problems that we just did. All right. Up here, the cosine of an angle is equal to the sine. We want to write in terms of sine of 90 minus that. So cosine of 15 equals the sine of 75. All right? Because 90 minus 15 equals 75. So, and then cosine of 83 is going to equal the sine. Well, 90 minus 83 is 7. So it equals the sine of 7 degrees. All right? And the cosine of 45 degrees equals the sine of 45 degrees, because 90 minus 45 is 45. So it equals the sine of 45 degrees. All right, so that's how we do those three. Very easy. All right. Next, we are going to use what we know about the sine and cosine to solve some problems. Now, for these kind of problems, you will need a calculator. All right, you have to have a calculator to do this, because you're going to have to punch in the sine and cosine. All right, and you can't do that in your head. There's no way to do it with writing it out or anything. You just have to put it into a calculator. All right, so here we go. We need to find the value of each variable. All right, so we need to find what is x, and we need to find what is y. And we're going to use the sine and cosine to do that. Well, here we have an angle. Right here, we know that this angle is 16 degrees. That means the sine of 16 degrees is going to equal what? Well, the sine of 16 degrees is the opposite that's the opposite, over the hypotenuse. And the hypotenuse is always the long side that is opposite the right angle. Here's our right angle, so it's 9. So that means the sine of 16 degrees has to be x over 9. It has to be x over 9. All right? So we know that it's x over 9. So we just need to know what is the sine of 16. And that's where you need a calculator. All right? So I'm just going to hit sine of 16 degrees, and I get 0.2756. All right? 0.2756. And that is going to equal x over 9. Okay, which means that x is going to equal 9 times this. All right, so I'm going to multiply 0.2756 times 9, and you get 2.48 blah blah blah, but they want to round to the nearest tenth, so 2.48 round to the nearest tenth is 2.5. All right, so x equals 2.5. Good, but we also need to find y. Now y is this one, which is adjacent to this angle. So now we're going to use the cosine, because the cosine of 16 degrees is going to have to equal the adjacent over the hypotenuse. All right, so y over 9. All right, so this is going to equal y over 9. So again, you have to use your calculator here. You want to find what is the cosine of 16 degrees. All right, and I got 0.9613. All right, 0.9613. And that is going to equal y over 9, which means that y is going to equal 0.9613 times 9. All right, so times 9, and that equals 8.65 blah 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 blah, which means when we round it, it's going to be 8.7. All right, so that's how we do this. All right, let's do the rest of these, and I'll try and go very quickly. All right, so here we have an angle. All right, we have an angle here. Now we want to use this sine of 72, and we're going to use the cosine of 72. All right, so we're going to use the sine, and we're going to use the cosine of 72. Boom, 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 boom. Well, the sine is the opposite over the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is 50. The opposite is n. So it's going to be n over 50. And the cosine is the adjacent, which is the side that's next to it, not the hypotenuse, but the side, that leg that's next to it, over the hypotenuse. So m over 50. Okay? So we've already got our two equations. All right, now I'm going to use my calculator. We need to find the sine of 72. So sine of 72. And that equals 0.9511. All right? 0.9511 equals n over 50. Well, that means that n is going to equal 50 times 0.9511. So I'm going to do that. Times 50, and it equals 47.55, which is 47.6. All right, so it's 47.6. So we found that answer. All right, and now we want to find m, and in order to find m, we need to find the cosine of 72. The cosine of 72 is 0.3090. All right, so I'll just write 0.309. And that is going to equal m over 50. Well, that means that m is going to equal 50 times this. All right, so 50 times that, and we get 15.45, blah, 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 which means it's going to be 15.5 rounded to the nearest tenth. Okay, so these are our answers for this one. These are our answers for number 11. Let's look at number 12. Number 12, we're going to still use the sine and the cosine. And this time we have 47. So we have the sine of 47 but we have a problem here. Sine of 47 is not going to be very helpful here because the sine is the opposite c divided by d. But we don't know either of those, all right? Sine of 47 degrees equals c over d. So we can't solve this yet. We're going to have to find one of these first. But fortunately, we do have this, the adjacent leg, which means that we can see that the cosine of 47 is going to be the adjacent leg, which is 10, over the hypotenuse, which is d. So we can use this to solve for d. And once we have d, then we'll be able to solve here, all right? So let's solve this. We first need to use our calculator to find what is the cosine of 47. So cosine of 47 equals 0.68199, which is 0.682, all right? 0.682, all right? And that is going to equal 10 over d. Now, if we want to solve for d, we need to move the d over here and move the 0.682 underneath. So d is going to equal 10 divided by 0.682. And if we do that, 10 divided by 0.682, oh, wait, I typed the wrong thing, 10. All right, and our answer is 14.66, so it's going to be 14.7. So we know that this is 14.7. So D equals 14.7, which means now we can solve this because we know that sine of 47 degrees is going to equal C over 14.7. All right, now we can use our calculator to find what is the sine of 47 degrees, and we get 0.7314. 0.7314 equals C over 14.7, which means that C is going to equal 14.7 times 0.7314, which is going to be times 14.7 is 10.75, which is 10.8. All right, 10.8, and so that is going to be our answer. Okay, good. And then finally, right here, what we can do. Now that was one way we could solve this. Another way we could solve this is see that instead of using the sine and cosine, we could actually use the tangent because we have the two legs here. So for this one, why don't we use the tangent? We can use what we had before. So if we want to find A, and we already have one leg right here, all right? This is going to be the ratio of two legs, which is the tangent, right? So we're going to use this angle, the tangent of 65 degrees is going to equal what? The opposite leg over the adjacent leg, which is 28 on top divided by A. All right. Now, what is the tangent of 65? Well, we put that into our calculator again. So we have the tangent of 65 and that equals 2.1445. All right, 2.1445. All right, so that's the tangent of 65, and we know that that has to equal 28 over A. And that means that A is going to have to equal, well, if we move the A up here and then the 2.14, it's going to have to be 28 divided by 2.1445. So 28 divided by 2.1445 is 13.05. So that's 13.1. 13.1. And that's going to be our answer. So that used the tangent. But now we need to find B. But B is the hypotenuse. So we're going to need to use the ratio to the hypotenuse. And 28 is the opposite side. So we're going to have the opposite side and the hypotenuse. What ratio can we use? The sine. The sine is the opposite over the hypotenuse, right? So we know that the sine of 65 degrees is going to equal 28 because that's the opposite. So katoa. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse. And the hypotenuse is B. All right, so 28 over B. All right, good. So we can now put into our calculator what is the sine of 65? And that's 0.9063. All right, so 0.9063. And that's going to equal 28 over B. Well, if we solve for B now, we're going to put the B over here, and then 0.9063 moves underneath, so it's going to be 28 divided by 0.9063. So 28 divided by that. Divided by that. And you get 30.89, which is 30.9 if we round to the nearest tenth. And that's the answer. Okay, so we have done all of those problems now. All right, we've done all those problems. So let's move on to our word problems. All right, a camera attached to a kite. We're just going to do the first one because I don't want to spend too much more time. A camera attached to a kite is filming the damage caused by a brush fire in a closed-off area. The camera is directly above the center of the closed-off area. Okay, so we have a closed-off area. So let's say this is the closed-off area, and we have a kite up here, and the kite has a camera, and it's taking pictures down. There's a camera attached to the kite taking pictures of this area. A person is standing 100 feet away. All right, so here's a person. They're standing 100 feet away from the center of the closed off area. And we know the kite is right above that. All right. The angle of depression. All right, so be careful here. We haven't talked about angle of depression yet. Angle of depression is this angle right here, all right? It's the angle going down from the horizontal. Here's the horizontal, the angle going down. This is 25 degrees, all right? How long is the string? We want to know how long is the string, which is the hypotenuse of this triangle. We're going to draw an upside down triangle right here. This angle is 25, all right? And we know that from here to here, this distance from here to here is 100. All right. And we want to know how long is this, x. Well, here's our angle that we know is 25. 100 is the leg of the triangle. It is the adjacent leg. And x is the hypotenuse of the triangle. We're looking at this upside down triangle right here. All right. X is the hypotenuse, and 100 is the adjacent leg. So we have adjacent and hypotenuse. what can we use? The cosine. Remember, the cosine is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. So we know that the cosine of 25 degrees is going to have to equal the adjacent side over the hypotenuse. So 100 over the hypotenuse, which is x. That's what we want to know. So now we can just solve for x. We're going to do that by using our calculator. What's the cosine of 25 degrees? 0.9063. 0.9063. And that's going to equal 100 over x. And then if we want to solve for x, what we're going to do is we're going to multiply both sides by x. So x is going to be up here. And then divide both sides by 0.93. So that's going to move down here. So we're just going to have x equals 100 divided by this. All right. So 100 divided by 0.9063. And that equals, hold on a second. 100 divided by 0.9063, and that equals 110.33. All right, so that's 110.3, and this is feet. All right, feet, and that's going to be our answer. So that's how we use the cosine or the sine to solve a problem like this. Okay, that's all I'm going to talk about today. I will give you a homework assignment. Make sure you do that. If you have any questions, you can send me a message on Discord or in our Google Classroom, and I will try and help you. Bye-bye.